Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Ophir Guttelson. For those who don't know me, I'm a founder and leading Unacceptable, both here in the Bay Area and nationwide. Um, we've been doing these Zooms and webinars since October 7 very frequently. And today I'm really pleasure to have Noga Tarnopolsky, who has been doing amazing job covering everything that's happening in Israel. And she's also a good friend. And I really appreciate, Noga, of you joining in between all those lives and interrupts. So for giving us your time.
My
Um,
pleasure.
I want to start first with a couple of, we will start soon, just in a second, with an update of what's going on right now on the ground in Israel and what do we think. We'll try to cover what does it mean for Israelis, what does it mean for Palestinians, what does it mean for the US-Israel relationship. But before that, just to take a breath and to be happy that we got to the point where we have a deal signed, I think approved by the cabinet, which is also a new update. And it's a full deal. It's a deal that's supposed to bring us all the hostages, and it's a deal that's supposed to end the war. And I want to emphasize that because one of the things that I want to get us out of this call is the notion that you are an ambassadors to your communities wherever you are. And it always sounds like it's like a partial deal, or it's potentially we can go back to war after, or all those type of statements that we will cover with Noga today. But it's really important for me to that if there is one thing you can take from here is that this is a full deal. We actually had Einav Zangauker on a press conference saying exactly the same with the mother of Matan Zangauker. So I want you to be with me on that, and let's cover and let's figure out, even though it's a full deal that's supposed to end the war and bring all the hostages until the last one of them, 98 hostages, what can go wrong, who can take it to the wrong side, and so on. So that's what we're going to try to uncover. And Noga, I'm getting to you. I mean, like, you've been covering this in and out for so many days and nights.
Yep.
And maybe just take some couple of minutes and tell us where we are on the deal, where we are on what's happening in Israel in the government, and what do we see if you know what's happening right now in Gaza.
Okay. First of all, I'm glad to see all of you who I see here, and thanks, Ophir, for inviting me. I guess I want to give this first just a framework, especially if you are all somehow ambassadors. As Ophir just said, I want to give just first a general framework. This ceasefire agreement, let's call it an armistice agreement, which might help us understand the scope, that has been hammered out now for months and months, is a document that may well end up in the trash heap within weeks. That is entirely possible. And we can go into the details of what are the things that could make that happen. But I also want to say that in the respect that Ophir was just talking about it, of a complete deal, a comprehensive deal, it is a comprehensive deal to end the war and to bring all the hostages back. It is, though, a phased deal. So we're not going to see, buses carrying 100 Israeli hostages anytime, not soon and not later. And it does make the deal more fragile because it's in steps. On the other hand, I think that what the people who conceived of this plan had in mind is that the momentum, especially within the Israeli public, the momentum of seeing hostages coming out alive, of seeing survivors emerge from this hellhole would be so strong that the Israeli government will not be able to stop it, even if it wants. That's what I think is happening. So this is a comprehensive deal that has the potential of radically changing the face of this part of the Middle East. If it is taken all the way to completion, we're talking about a deal in which a new administration would arise for Gaza. We don't know whom. That's a big hurdle. But there would be somebody that is neither Hamas nor the Israeli army administrating Gaza. The understanding is that it will be Arab forces from Arab countries with the administration of the Palestinian Authority. It is true that it's hard to imagine this Netanyahu government going for that. And one of the unknowns right now is what the incoming Trump administration is going to provide in this respect. We don't know. But at the end of the day, this accord, if taken through to the end, will see a new leadership in Gaza, and that new leadership implies inherent within it that there will be a path to Palestinian statehood, because all of the nations, not all Arab countries, it includes Turkey, all of the countries that can and have expressed willingness to rebuild Gaza are also countries that have said they will only step in if they believe that there's a pathway to Palestinian nationhood. That would be a radical change of circumstances here where I live. And that would also probably bring a radical change of political circumstances in Israel. So that's kind of the good scenario if this deal is followed through to the end. If it's not, what we may see is a kind of a truncated half, miracle, half tragedy, like in November 2023, when we were all witness to these incredibly moving scenes of Israeli hostages walking out or being wheeled out of Gaza alive. And then the deal was cut off one day before it was supposed to end. You may remember the war was relaunched. That is not an impossible scenario now again. So we have those two extremes and everything in between.
So let's cover the steps for what does the deal look like, and what are those milestones, and what can still go wrong even in the first milestone.
Okay, first let's talk about what's in there. The only concrete part of this deal is phase one. It's a 42-day period, and on day 16 of those 42 days is when negotiations for phase two are supposed to start, which means that these first 2 weeks of this 6-week phase are really critical, because at any point, either of the sides could try and blow it up or could just blow it up. Things happen. During this period of 42 days, 33 Israeli hostages are supposed to be released. 3 of them are American Israelis, 2 of them are Franco-Israelis. There are no complete foreign citizens in this initial group. Very harrowingly, we have been led to understand that at least 10 of those 33 names on the list of the hostages supposed to be released in the first tranche are dead. But nobody knows who is alive and who is dead among these 33. So in a way, the whole structure of this, they're also supposed to be released in drips and drabs. So if this deal is in fact ratified and is put into effect, on Sunday we should see 3 Israeli hostages released and something like close to 300 Palestinian prisoners released. The rumor has it that these first three Israelis to be released are going to be young female soldiers, 3 of the spotters who warned of the catastrophe, who were ignored, who were unarmed, and who were taken. But again, this is unofficial. And then no one is supposed to be released for a full week. The next release is supposed to be 4 Israeli hostages on day 7. So this is designed, you could say, as a form of torture. For the families involved, it's just unspeakable. It's basically every day of their lives is going to be a Russian roulette. And it's not going to be exactly the situation where they're going to be told, come pick up your daughter, come pick up your father, without knowing if that person is alive or dead. But it's going to be pretty close. They're apparently just going to find out when Israel finds out, and Israel's just going to find out a few hours before, if that. We've been told already, for example, that Hamas will inform Israel who are the people to be released just hours before their release. It's an extremely difficult thing. Again, we can look at this like a form of psychological terror, which it is. We can simultaneously look at it as a structure intended to protect the next phases, because if 33 families get their loved ones back in one form or another, I think the intention behind this structure was the Israeli public is not going to let the Israeli government get away with cutting it off again. Of course, not everything depends or can or should depend on the Israeli public and on activists. And it's really hard to demand of a battered public to defend itself against its own government and against a foreign enemy at the same time, which is what Israelis are being asked to do. Of course, Hamas could not keep its word, or rogue elements within Gaza could break the agreement, maybe even severely. Islamic Jihad is also involved in this deal. It is also holding some Israeli hostages, and it will also get some of its prisoners released. That's another loose cannon. And the big unknown right now is the incoming Trump administration, where we have contradictory signals. So the president-elect, to the utter shock, I mean, indescribable shock of the Israeli right wing, Donald Trump, since his election, has said he wants this war over and done with. It's one of the few things he has been completely consistent with for months now. And even last night, he was, truthing on his Truth Social platform that he managed to coerce Benjamin Netanyahu in one day more than Joe Biden had in a year, or something like that. So he seems to be on track. But there are other people around Donald Trump who we don't know. For example, the incoming ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is an evangelical Christian. We don't know how influential he'll be, but he's someone likely, like the previous Trump ambassador, David Friedman, to give Israel the okay to annex or to pseudo-annex the West Bank. I don't know if the administration will go for it, but that certainly is his headspace. There are many rumors right now in Jerusalem of what Netanyahu promised Ben-Gvir to entice him not to resign, and what he has promised Smotrich, who has apparently decided not to resign in phase 1, only to resign if phase 2 is enacted. So we hear that he's been promised rampant.
No, just before we go to the promises, I want to kind of like, I'm not sure that everyone is on top of what was the last 2 days in Israel look like. So first, let's go back a week or a couple of days before, when we heard about the hostages deal happening. We hear that this is the same almost deal that was on the table in May, and which means like almost like a year ago. That since then we had 30 hostages being murdered or killed at captivity, and Ben-Gvir is coming out publicly and basically bragging about the idea that he was able politically to hold back those deals from happening. And since that day, I mean, he's keep pushing for canceling the deal. What does that mean from a political perspective to Netanyahu and to the government? And could it be, I mean, does Ben-Gvir and Smotrich ever had so much influence, or was it really a decision for Netanyahu to make at any point of time like he's making today?
All right, let's step back a week, 8 days, 9 days. First of all, let me just say, to have it out there, Prime Minister Netanyahu has not been seen in public in more than a week. the last picture we had of him before today, hilariously, in a very not hilarious situation, is the picture of him from last Saturday, so a week ago, where he met Trump's incoming Middle East Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff. I will use salty language here to describe to you what we understand happened there. This was reported by Chaim Levinson of Haaretz, and it's a funny anecdote. Steve Witkoff is a very wealthy, successful Jewish real estate titan from Florida. He apparently called up Netanyahu Friday night, so Shabbat, and said, I'm meeting you tomorrow at 10. He was already in Doha as part of the US negotiating team, which is unusually a blend of Biden and Trump people. And so the Netanyahu team said, oh, tomorrow doesn't work, it's Shabbat. Could you come another day? To which he replied, I don't give a fuck. I'm meeting you tomorrow at 10. That's what we've been told here. And he showed up. He was in Jerusalem for just a few hours. He apparently delivered an extremely harsh, or I would say extremely unequivocal message to Netanyahu, which stated that if Netanyahu didn't make this deal happen, there would be consequences for Israel. So there has been talk of a peace deal on the table, as Ophir said, since May. On May 27th, in fact, Joe Biden announced a peace deal.
Not a peace, just a ceasefire, end of war. Peace is
an
still
end
far
of
away.
war and hostage release deal. Well, peace in Gaza.
Yeah.
A hostage release deal has been on the table since May 27th, when Joe Biden announced it and said that this was Benjamin Netanyahu's deal. Netanyahu 4 days later walked it back. He basically reneged on his promise. And that was when he started discussing the absolute necessity for Israel's security of holding on to the Philadelphia corridor. That was a very shrewd move on his part, because in Israel, very few people had heard of the Philadelphia corridor at that point using that term. Only real military experts knew it. And so people were sort of willing to believe him, at least initially.
What is the Philadelphia corridor?
The Philadelphia corridor doesn't touch on Israel at all. It's the border between Gaza and Egypt. And many years ago, about 10 years ago, it was a dangerous border because Hamas was smuggling arms via it. This hasn't been happening now in something like 8 years. As Ophir posted with a television interview of Nadav Argaman, the former head of the Shin Bet, who explained that at Israel's request, I think it was 8 years ago, Egypt simply flooded the tunnels under the Philadelphia corridor and then filled them with cement. That's it. They wrecked an entire neighborhood on the Egyptian side to just get it done. So no arms have come through there. The only arms that have come through from Egypt into Gaza in recent years have come through the Rafah border crossing, which is on the Philadelphia line, on the same long border between Egypt and Gaza, but it's a regular border crossing. Very corrupt. So anyway, Israelis have known, despite government denials, that this deal was on the table since the end of May. And it has been kind of a thread over many, many months in which there's been a lot of other news. And, you know, Hezbollah was basically destroyed. Hassan Nasrallah was killed. Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, was killed. A lot has been going on. A lot of also political scandals in Israel, Netanyahu's trial, you name it. But all along, there's been this thread that families of hostages have been talking about, which is there's a deal on the table. The government all along has flat out denied this. I mention this denial because in recent days, after Trump's envoy basically came and strong-armed Netanyahu into accepting the Biden deal, Ben-Gvir did come out, like Ophir said, and boasted that he had scuttled this deal. Much more remarkable than that, in my eyes, Netanyahu's cabinet secretary, Yossi Fuchs, responded to Ben-Gvir by saying, no, we did. We scuttled it. And Netanyahu, in a later statement, admitted in a written official statement of the government of Israel that the deal under discussion today is identical to the May 27th deal. This has caused unplumbed depths of agony and anguish and questioning inside Israel. This changed the mood in the last few days here from kind of quiet hope, I would say hope blended with fear, to something much darker. To, there's a series of military officers who spoke with the journalist Ronen Bergman in Yediot, talking about their feelings at the realization that the deal now under discussion is the same one that could have been put into place in May, realizing how many hostages have died or been executed since, how many young soldiers, more than 100 have died in this interim period. These officers in Ronen Bergman's interview, which unfortunately hasn't been translated, sounded like they were on the verge of harakiri. They sounded like they were facing an abyss of abuse of the army and of their military knowledge. So the mood in Israel, despite the fact that there is real hope that we may see hostages emerge from Gaza on Sunday, as early as Sunday, at least 3 of them, the mood in Israel is very, very dark. And Netanyahu, I believe that in order to stave off any serious accusations against him of having basically, through his own negligence, caused the death, forget how many thousands, tens of thousands of Gazans, of having caused the deaths of his own citizens, of having sent soldiers into combat for improper purposes, of having caused the execution of the 6 hostages or provoked this execution on September 1st. I think that's one of the reasons that he has not been seen in public in more than a week. And the other thing is, I think that's one of the reasons why he took advantage of Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the minister of national security, of their public wavering, of their sword rattling. He took advantage of that to sow a kind of chaos in Israel. So his spokesman was issuing statements left, right, and center that Hamas was trying to extort Israel, he was being blackmailed, that who knows what, a big chaos, so that even family members of hostages who are supposed to get the information first had literally no idea what was going on. And that has been the reality for all Israelis, basically until now. They still have, President Biden has spoken, President Trump has tweeted, the Qatari Prime Minister Al-Thani has spoken, French President...
And Netanyahu sent Bougie, Herzog, the president, to speak.
Except Bougie Herzog, even the Israeli president hasn't made a public statement. He hasn't stood up in front of the public and spoken. No one has in Israel other than Ben-Gvir. So Israelis are thrust into a very murky, very frightening, very, very confusing situation when they are the ones who should be at the center of this. It is their hostages that, in theory, are about to get out. Not a single Israeli leader has spoken to them directly yet. So I hope I've at least described, the vibe.
And so today's Friday. Yesterday, we didn't know yet what the process would be, but I mean, the family of the father of Liri Elbag, one of the soldiers, female soldiers, who was supposed to be released, hopefully, was begging Netanyahu to convince the government, because he said, "Oh, it's Shabbat, so we cannot really convene." But I want to connect it to the point, which I don't think that everyone is aware. I mean, like, it's once the cabinet is approving, the government needs to approve. And once the government approves that, there is 48 hours which families of, maybe you can explain better, Noga. I mean, there is a court, the Supreme Court's supposed to have a hearing if those releases of prisoners, terrorists from Israel can actually happen or not. Noga, can you speak more about that?
Yes, and I don't want to waste too much time on this government's shenanigans because it's disgusting. But it is also important to know about. For example, right now, what time is it? It is 8:20 p.m. Friday here. The government, as far as we know, as far as I know, the cabinet meeting is still ongoing. We have received no notification about any vote having been taken yet, about it having been concluded, nothing. Why can I say to you with confidence that this deal is a done deal? because of behind the scenes. About 2 hours ago, the Israeli Justice Ministry released to journalists a list of names of Palestinian security prisoners to be released in the context of this ceasefire hostage release deal. The Justice Ministry is authorized to do that only as a result of a cabinet decision, a government decision. So we think that the government decision has been taken. Otherwise, the Justice Ministry wouldn't have put out this list. But no one has said so. No one has made an announcement, no statement, no video from the Prime Minister, nothing. We really are kind of stumbling around in the dark. I want to say something else about the question of Shabbat. It's very interesting because it's true. As always, Netanyahu kicked this can down the road as far as he could, and all of a sudden we were up against Shabbat. At least half of this government, if not more, is religiously observant. And so all of a sudden, between yesterday afternoon and today, Israel was filled with talk about how these disgusting religious ministers, they're going to force the hostages to remain another day in Gaza just because they observe Shabbat. And over the course of the night, religious commentators began saying, what are you talking about? Pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat. Saving a life is much more important than Shabbat. And then today we finally heard from one of the Shas ministers who was enraged and who described this entire, let's say 15 hours of rumor mill as basically a smear campaign from Netanyahu's office because he wanted to get more time. He wanted to, make more time to keep negotiating with Ben Gvir and with Smotrich, the in-house terrorists, unlike Hamas, the foreign terrorists, because he needed more time. So his office has been leaking that Shabbat was the problem.
We're talking about Moshe Arbel from Shas?
That's right. Moshe Arbel from Shas, who's one of the Shas ministers, came on the radio this afternoon, simply incandescent with rage, and said this was never on us. This is a filthy campaign of rumors. So this is how this government operates, okay? The government operates on the basis of smear campaigns, one against the other, even when they're really filthy, even when human life is at stake. It's, it's the sort of thing that had it happened, let's say, in the French government, let's say a rumor been started that because of a religiously observant Jewish minister, something important wouldn't have happened, Israel would have accused them of anti-Semitism. How dare you blame the Jews? That's how this government operates. And Israelis are drowning in this kind of muck. And it's very hard to see anything clear through it. That was why it was important for you to start by laying out what are the parameters of this possible deal, because something good really could come of it. But Israelis are having a tough time seeing that just yet.
And I want to try and get a little bit into the discussion that was going around. We are in a situation similar to what Carter and Reagan were, like who is in charge of the deal and what happened and what can happen, and are we actually delaying it more because of the inauguration? I honestly feel like it's all kind of like everyone is trying to take credit. I thought that the President Biden was courageous enough to say, like, well, this is because of actually the point where we put Hamas in, and now they're suddenly coming back. So I want to cover this thing, and the other thing is, you mentioned that this deal is actually supposed to end up with a different leadership, a different in Gaza,
Yeah.
but we ending up after 15 months of fighting, 800 or more soldiers dead, 100 hostages still there, and we are negotiating with Hamas. We are not negotiating with anyone else. Right.
Okay, so let's discuss some convergences and some divergences. Netanyahu's kind of, I don't know what word to use. Netanyahu's very narrow focus on his own survival has gone to such an extreme that incredibly it brought about a common cause between the administration of Joe Biden and the administration of Donald Trump, who have very little in common. Blinken and Biden have worked very, very hard to come up with a paradigm that can end this war. And they have been telling Israel for months, you've got to wrap it up. But it's true that they don't operate, with sharp elbows. They're not mafia types. And also, I think we have to remember that Joe Biden and Antony Blinken, at the beginning of this war, were dealing with a very different reality in which Israel had been ravaged. Israeli vulnerability had been laid plain in front of the whole world. Iran was ascendant. There was still an assumption back then that Hezbollah posed an even greater threat than Hamas, and Hamas had destroyed a third of the country. So we have to put in perspective, not just different personal styles, but the different realities. I think that for Biden and for Blinken, trying to help Israel save itself was of a paramount importance. And I think that also trying to save US strategy in the Middle East in its entirety was another paramount importance. Help me get back on track, Ophir.
We talked about the idea that who is taking credit for the deal.
Right. I remember. I'm not that interested in the credit thing. I have to say, I don't think Hamas give a damn who is the US president at all. I don't think that's a part. I think this is almost, I hate to say it, but almost a kind of invention of the media sphere. If we look at the history of Donald Trump's boastful statements, his boasts in the last 2 days that we got a deal across, it's very, very mild. I'm not sure, he was happy to boast that he's better than Biden, but it's just one little tweet. I'm not sure that we really are back in 1981 in a Carter-Reagan situation where the Iranians wanted to stick their finger in Carter's eye, and they did. And Ronald Reagan, I think to his shame, played along. I think here the real central character, I'm sorry to say, is Netanyahu, who I think began to believe his own fantasies and convinced most of his ministers, who are by and large not worldly people, apart from Nir Barkat, who has not really proven his mettle in the last year or so. And apart from the fired defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who has years of experience dealing with international military affairs, the other ministers in his government are pretty provincially Israeli. And I think that they basically bought hook, line, and sinker Netanyahu's vision, his story of Trump as his best friend. You may remember posters in 2019 in one of Netanyahu's election campaigns, him with Trump. Netanyahu seems to believe that he could manipulate Trump, that he had him in his pocket, and he acted throughout this year as if a Trump victory was going to let him act unfettered, do whatever he wanted. And I think the ministers bought it. By and large, I think a significant chunk of Israelis bought it, among them Netanyahu's fans and Netanyahu's very much not fans. In Israel, there's sort of across the board right now shock that Trump seems to really want this war done with, because the understanding was these are a bunch of evangelicals. They're going to let Israel do whatever they want. My impression is that Donald Trump does not want to have to deal with this war.
Yeah.
Second, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
I think Donald Trump may also not want to have to deal with Netanyahu. I think in his first term, he may have allowed Netanyahu to flatter him. He certainly allowed Netanyahu to impact him regarding the Iran nuclear deal. But that didn't end up very well for Trump. He has hinted at that in the past, and I think we're unlikely to see that kind of a bromance again. So Netanyahu is going to have to, again, square this circle. He made promises. Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister who we think maybe never even had a bank account, he appears to genuinely believe that Donald Trump's entrance to the White House is going to let him become basically the governor of Judea and Samaria. Now, we have to all wait a few weeks and see how this goes, but I would be surprised if that were to happen. I think Donald Trump right now is much more interested in becoming palsy with the Saudi leadership and maybe even in making a new Iran deal. That's what we're hearing.
I thought you would say that he wants to be the governor of Greenland. But
Not so much.
I want to bring us back a little bit. I want to make sure everyone understands that, I mean, we are now in this on convergence, and I wear this shirt specifically, I mean, where we are seeing dramatic shift. I mean, not dramatic shift, I would say we are seeing clearly where the watershed is passing between Israelis and I mean, that believe in life, believe in peace, believe in living together, not fighting the war until the end of life. And those people, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and by the way, there are even more extremists than them, Feiglin and others, who are now taking to the streets, and they are protesting against the deal. So there is, they call it, we are the right from the right, right to the right of Netanyahu. So
yeah, but Ophir, but this right to the right, it's a creation of Netanyahu.
okay,
He
say more.
fostered, in the same way that he fostered Itamar Ben-Gvir as a political figure, because he knew that as an indicted criminal, very few political parties were going to agree to sit with him in government, and he needed extremists who wouldn't care that he was an indicted criminal. He has also fostered these fantasies. Let us not forget the year 2020, an entire year during which the only thing Netanyahu spoke about, and to my shame, the only thing journalists spoke about for a whole year, was West Bank annexation. Remember that? There was a July 1 deadline. The West Bank was going to be annexed by then. Netanyahu climbed up a very, very tall tree. The only thing that saved him, in a way, was the United Arab Emirates, who they themselves were looking for an avenue to normalize with Israel. And Netanyahu ended up, that was the Abraham Accords. Netanyahu ended up selling this to Israelis as, didn't get you annexation, but I got you peace with the, with the important Persian Gulf nations. What he very, very successfully and very unfortunately elided in this whole big PR shebang is that he never could have done annexation. And the very weak and ineffective Israeli opposition, I don't know why, has never really forced him to address it. He lied to the entire country for a whole year. He never had the votes. There were never any military preparatives. The United States was never going to go for it, not even Jared Kushner. This was a fantasy, and like the current fantasy of, imposing a Jewish theocracy in Gaza, this is a fantasy that Netanyahu fostered, because allowing people to wallow in this and imagine this gave him power. Chaos in Israeli society gives him power. Uncertainty gives him power. All of these lunatic pronouncements that are scary to the huge bulk of Israelis that Ophir was just describing, people who want to live. All of this chaos empowers him because it overwhelms the systems. It's shock doctrine.
And again, speaking about the chaos, of course, if you haven't watched the movie BB Fire, I mean, like, this will actually make a lot of things available. You can see it on Jolt Fields. It's available there. So we are 2 years. I mean, I want us to connect to the other. We are now saying in Israel we need to watch two balls, right? In the air. At least two of them. One is making sure that the gate is kept open for all the hostages to come back and to the end of the war. And on the other hand, as we speak, just last week, I mean, we are 2 years from the judicial coup, and basically everyone in the government is keep trying to go through it. I mean, there was a deadline for this Chief Justice to be appointed, which was postponed. There is a judicial committee new law that is on the table.
The Judicial Selections Committee.
Judicial Selection Committee. So where is this finding Israelis? To your point of view, Israelis are aware of those, or they are, as you said, they are in shock doctrine and they are not able to actually deal with both of them as much as we are unable to deal with both of them.
Right. Okay. I want to get to that, but I first want to just, in case I wasn't clear enough, I want to read to you guys from my colleague from Fox News. They have a very, very sharp correspondent here in Israel news guy, not a talk show guy, called Trey Yanks. And late last night, as we were beginning to understand that Netanyahu was simply telling his ministers, we're about to go back to war, while signing an agreement and authorizing the leaders of the Mossad and the Shin Bet to sign an agreement in Israel's name that ends this war, this is what Trey Yanks posted. He said, there's a massive disconnect between the Israeli coalition position about defeating Hamas and resuming the war and the ceasefire agreement endorsed by the Americans. I wanted to put that on the table just because when he says the Americans, I hear an implication that it's both Biden and Trump who want this war finished. Now I'll go back to your question. I think, Ophir, that Israelis are overwhelmed, and it may be unfair for Israelis to ask, people who care for them abroad, specifically in the United States, to support them during this very difficult period when the United States is also in a difficult period and frightening. And it's going to be a lot of shock also in the United States, I have no doubt. So I understand that. But what Israelis are going through right now is extremely, extremely dangerous and extremely radical. Just in the past year, so these 42 days that we're talking about so earnestly, hostage release, will the second phase even be negotiated for, what's going to happen? This is the substance of the matter as we see it, as I see it, as all of us are discussing here. This is not the substance for the government. This Netanyahu government, as difficult as it is to believe, as difficult it will be for you to believe what I'm about to say to you, the reality is that this government does not care if the hostages come back and may prefer that they not come back. Yesterday, Ophir tweeted a very shattering interview with Yocheved Lifshitz, a former hostage, age 85, who survived, who described a situation in which she was so sick in captivity that Hamas wanted to let her go, and the Israeli government wasn't willing to take her under those sort of haphazard conditions. She said the government wants to see cadavers because they don't want people coming back to describe what they underwent in Gaza. And I'm not sure she's wrong, and I don't think she's exaggerating. I say this because the government has an entirely different vision of these incoming 42 days. From the Netanyahu point of view, while the entire population and even the international committee is out there with their eyes on the hostages, eyes on Gaza, what this government is planning on doing is basically trying to wrap up their coup d'etat proposed way back 2 years ago in January 2023, as Ophir just said. They want to push it through in these 42 days, and then they won't have to worry so much about holding on to power. The laws being proposed right now destroy the balance of power in Israel. They would allow judges to be appointed directly by ministers, right? So I'm Minister of Labor, let's say. I want my cousin to be the judge. It means Netanyahu, who is on trial currently, will have the power to replace the judges trying him if he wants. We are entering very dangerous territory here. The fact that the Minister of Justice, who is kind of, the chief, one of the two chief, champions of this effort to take over the administration of the state, and I'm quoting him now, that the fact that he was able to again postpone the seating, by law, the obligatory seating of a chief justice, the fact that the Minister of Communications is galloping ahead with an attempt to take over not only media outlets, not only to destroy the public broadcaster, but for the state to take over the agency that does ratings for different TV shows, so that their in-house channels, Netanyahu's version of the One America channel and Fox News, will be rated by the government. They are simply galloping ahead, and they expect, and they may be right if we're not vigilant, we journalists, we Israelis, they may be able to use these 42 days and their remaining Knesset majority, while everyone else is distracted, they may try and enact this coup d'etat. That would give Netanyahu basically Viktor Orban-like powers over the academy, over the National Library, over the National Statistics Institute, you name it. They are very ambitious. So one of the ways that Netanyahu has gotten his people to vote for this agreement, even though they hate it, is because they know what goodies are coming to them. And this is extremely dangerous. I am not an activist. I have no idea how to awaken Israelis to the fact that they may be allowing their state to be stolen while they're getting some hostages back. But that is the extent of the danger here right now.
Yeah, and again, I mean, like we can keep talk about that for the whole another session. I mean, there's so much going on, different laws, and just again, FYI, I mean, like as part of what's happening right now in Israel. I mean, as far as I know, Noga, correct me if I'm wrong, the first terrorists that were released were actually Jewish terrorists by the by Israel
By the
Katz, defense
Minister of
minister,
Defense.
without even consulting the Shin Bet. This is crazy. So
It's
I want us
worse
to
than that,
close.
Ophir.
Sorry, go
Worse.
ahead. Yeah.
He ignored the Shin Bet. He ignored the IDF. The nominal Minister of Defense, who is basically a Netanyahu right-hand man, a very ineffective guy, released from detention today 5 West Bank Jewish settlers who are accused of crimes, of nationalistic crimes. Let them go, signed it, posted a picture of himself on Twitter, signing them away. And so Phil's right. The first terrorists released in order to help this deal wash down are Jewish terrorists. This is also a little bit of candy being thrown at Ben Gvir. See, we're still with you, buddy. He himself is a guy who was convicted of terror and hate crimes 13 times. So this is them saying, don't go too far away from us. But it's a lawless government. This is a government whose ministers no longer adhere to Supreme Court decisions. Supreme Court rulings are being crushed and ignored right now in Israel. Israel is in that liminal space between a democracy and an autocracy. We're floating somewhere in between right now with a government that does not believe in the rule of law explicitly, openly, proudly. And it's very, very dangerous.
So I want us to close soon, and I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat that I got. One of them is...
I have to just say, I have 9 minutes. I have
you have 9 minutes, you're going live somewhere, so we're going to make
I have another commitment.
So you'll need to get us short answers.
Okay.
So the first question is like, do we know the names of the 33 that are coming? And everyone is asking about the Bibas family, of course. And before I mean, I don't know if you have the knowledge or not. I mean, like I know that I saw some pictures, but I don't know if it's true or not, if it's finalized. But one thing that I got as a request from actually Gil Dickman, the cousin of Carmel Gad that was murdered, he asked, and people are asking him, what can we do? Make sure you post the picture of all the 98, all the time. So the psychology war about, oh, we are going to end up with 33 and continue the war is not going to happen in the minds of people. So, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, like, Noga, do you know if the Bibas family is on the list or not?
The Bibas family is on the list. I have the list right here. I'll send it to you, Ophir, when we're done, and you can post it.
Yeah.
The Israeli government, very quietly, with no announcement, did post this list just a few hours ago. It's in alphabetical order. And again, I want to underscore, we don't know who is alive and who is dead on this list. All we know is that these 33 were considered particularly acute humanitarian cases by the state of Israel. It's an Israeli list. And Hamas has not said who among them they will release at any point.
And just to clarify, this is a list requested by Israel. So it's not a list that was actually offered by Hamas. Someone in the Israeli government decided who is on the list and who is not, which is crazy by itself. But we are going to take anyone, obviously, and everyone, and make sure that the gate is
Netanyahu
open.
is being accused right now of playing Schindler's List. The kind of just dripping dark humor that has taken over Israel in recent days is difficult to describe. It's terrible.
The other question that is here about is, again, is we actually didn't cover it as much as we should, but I mean, like, everyone on the media is obviously showing the happiness and the celebration coming out of Gaza. And we know we have friends who are Palestinian Gazan, who are devastated by the idea that this war is ending and Hamas is still on the ground. I mean, what we are seeing right now is what's happening on the ground, really. And do you know if there is actually any resistance to Hamas?
Look, it's impossible for there to be resistance to Hamas because people are barely alive. I mean, people are struggling to find what to eat and to drink in Gaza. People are struggling to go to sleep not knowing if they're going to be bombed over the night. It's very hard to describe the extent of the devastation in Gaza. In addition, the people inside Gaza, the native Gazans inside Gaza who are still armed and dangerous are Hamas. But I'll give you a different perspective. The expressions of joy are absolutely genuine. I have colleagues in Gaza, and I want to say something else. Look carefully at all of these videos that have come out since Wednesday night of exultant Gazans. You're not going to see a single Hamas flag in those crowds. You're not going to hear a single one of these people interviewed say a good word about Hamas. No one is saying, oh, thank you, Hamas, for finishing this deal. Hamas appears to be finished among Gazans. I want to go back just quickly to say there's a myth among extremes of the right and the left that the Palestinians chose, that they voted in Hamas. This is convenient for the right wing that wants to say all the Palestinians are terrorists. It has proven, unfortunately, convenient for the extreme left that like to say, oh, Hamas is a legitimate representative resistance. All of that is fake. Hamas did well. They won by a hair in a parliamentary election back in 2006. They were never elected by Palestinians to run anything. And so let's keep it in perspective. Hamas appears to be, this appears to be an extraordinary moment in which a new administration could come in to Gaza, and the one man standing as an obstacle to that right now is Benjamin Netanyahu, who has promised his ministers that the Palestinian Authority that he has for years described as bad or worse than Hamas, which is an evil lie, that they won't come in. And of course, they're exactly the people who should come in. As corrupt as they are, as problematic as they are, they need boosting. They're the ones who should come in. And we right now are in a circumstance where Palestinian Authority bureaucrats with experience could come in, boosted by funds and by a policing force from Bahrain, from the Emirates, from Turkey, from Egypt. This is the moment. Netanyahu refuses to deal with it.
And we do hear again from different sources that Trump is dealing directly with the PA, with the Palestinian Authority.
Absolutely, I can
actually get them on
that.
board on that. I will end up. We have one more minute by asking all of you to. One is to remember that the majority of Israelis are for the deal, are for ending the war, are for an investigation to what happened in October 7, and they are not really Israel is not those faces right now.
Not only a majority, about 80% of Israelis. It is a vast majority. I'll give credit to Vice President Harris for something really important that she did in interviews, many interviews and in statements. She kept differentiating between the government of Israel and the people of Israel. And we really have to follow that.
I will send you more links at the follow-up in the recording, but listen to one of those that we had translated from Shikma Bressler, Professor Shikma Bressler, where she was speaking about the choices that we all have to make. Those of you in the US, you will have ability to influence that using the World Zionist Congress voting. So make sure you find a slate that is doing that. And for all of us, we need to stay alert. Noga, I want to really, really thank you for joining us for this amazing hour.
My pleasure.
And we'll keep in touch. I know that you need to go, and I'll just stay with the audience
Okay.
one couple of more minutes. Thank you
I
so much.
hope to join you guys next time under even happier circumstances.
Definitely.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ophir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So for all of you who are staying, I want to ask you again, I mean, like, make sure that we are on the ambassadors of the families. We are the ambassadors of everyone who stays for the second stage of the same deal. Make sure you are alert. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on all the translation. If you can support us, there is a new link that I will share about the monthly support that you can try and do that. That will be super helpful for all of us here. And other than that, I mean, I want to offer you Shabbat Shalom. And remember, Israel is still there to fight for, and we will end up surviving this government and this situation. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone.